Bachelor of Arts in Journalism from the University of Florida, holds a Master's of Education from Atlantic University and a Master's of Arts from the University of Central Florida in Multicultural Education and Education Leadership, respectively. She's been in education as a student, yeah, and she is still here. She's currently pursuing her doctorate in curriculum, teaching, and teacher education here at UF. She is also a wife and a mother, and you can read about her family's antics on Twitter. So before I formally introduce her, raise your hand if you're familiar with #4UF. All right. Now, for those of you who are not, I encourage you to speak with those who are, and learn more about that organization on Twitter, because I can guarantee you that you need buckle up right now. Val, like a sprinter, comes out of the blocks, hot and fast. So be ready. Okay? So without further ado, Val Brown.
I've never done a microphone I did not like, so forgive me. I also come with jokes. How do you turn a duck into a soul singer? You put it in the microwave until it still lives. That's right. Come on in. You can eat in here, you can relax in here, it's family. All right, so I get a chance to speak with phenomenal people today. I'm going to start with introductions. I'm going to start all the way on my left. We are all on a first name basis here, and so that's how I introduce them. And I've had a chance to break bread with each of them at some point over the past year. And so I'm really excited to listen and learn with our panelists today. So we'll start with Dr. Rajni. As an associate professor and the Jesse Ball DuPont Endowed Chair of Social Justice Education at Stetson University, she's also the executive director of the Poverty and Homelessness Conference and the co-director of Acts of Kindness and Justice. Her work focuses on civic engagement, equity and eco-justice, contemplative practices, compassion fatigue, human rights, and peace advocacy. Let's give it up for them. Ian is the Safe and Healthy Schools Associate Director for Equality Florida, whom is currently supporting 20 of our school districts in Florida to have the requisite training and resources to take full ownership over the needs of LGBTQ youth. Ian is responsible for fighting the extensive risk factors which disproportionately affect our LGBTQ youth in school, including bullying, homelessness, self-harm, substance abuse, and HIV transmission. Let's give it up for Ian. Lucy, my ride-or-die. That's right, all right. Has 22 years of experience designing, developing, and implementing academic programs with emphasis on serving English language learners and migrant and seasonal farm worker youth access to higher education. Lucy has received national and international awards for her leadership promoting academic excellence, empowering parents, and delivering culturally sensitive educational resources and services in Putnam County and Northeast Florida. Thank you, Lucy, for being here. And finally, someone who I call my brother, Byron, is an experienced principal with a demonstrated history of successfully working in middle and high school education. His professional passions include the recruitment, retention, and mentorship of Black male educators, as well as access and opportunity for students of color. Byron is a Brian Zaster Leadership Academy Fellow and a member of the School Educational Leadership Enhancement Committee Selection. And there's a lot of School Educational Leadership Enhancement Committee Task Force, also known as SELECT, for the Department of Education. Let's give it up for Byron. Okay, so I prepped them a little bit with the first question, all right? And it's really focused on the title of this particular conference that we're at today, the imperative for social justice in schools. And so I was really thinking about that word imperative and about how that was a really intentional choice. And so from your perspective, why is social justice in schools an imperative? And we can start with whomever is ready to go. Or Byron.
Good afternoon, everyone. thinking about the idea of why social justice is imperative for me as a building school principal, obviously, I talk about in our school, our why is really about learning, ensuring that all kids learn. I say that kids don't feel safe in school unless they're learning. Kids don't feel special unless they're learning. And so we are really trying to look at the idea of equity as a lever to increase outcomes for students in school. And so the imperative for me begins with the classroom teachers. They are on the forefront with our kids each and every day. And I've been to several sessions today. I've been to various sessions which we talked about daring to teach and doing things that weren't in the curriculum and taking risks, even though those things weren't necessarily approved or, they were things that the administration wanted her to be doing. We went to another session and the idea was talking about, loving our kids and having humanity for our children. And the reality is we have a spectrum of teachers in our classrooms. And so we have some that are like Miriam, and they dare to teach. They come into our classrooms, they're going to do what's best for kids no matter what. It doesn't matter what the kid looks like, where they're from, and they're going to do what is right for those students. And then we have those teachers, unfortunately, that don't care for all of our students. And they may not explicitly say that, but their actions demonstrate it. And so for me, the imperative is making sure that our students and teachers who are in our building, my team, and those that I have influence with, that when I have seats at the table, are doing things that help to make sure that every student has an opportunity to have a quality academic educational experience.
Good afternoon. It is imperative that we address social justice in our classrooms so every child feels and sees themselves identified in not only the curriculum but also the student body and feels like they belong and they matter. Because we were just in a session with Donna Nicholas, and he was explaining, his session was When You See Me. And it was basically, we have some teachers in our classrooms and in our systemic, in our systems that just do not see our children. And the professional development that is designed to deliver, designed for our teachers doesn't match the makeup of our communities and the social realities where our students are coming from. So we have to be very intentional in identifying the problems, but also identifying the solutions and making sure that our students feel reflected in the curriculum, the faculty, the staff, and that they feel safe. And that is the only way that they are all going to learn. It cannot happen any other way. We have been doing the same for many, many years, and we're still saving our children.
So I certainly appreciate you all for having me today, and I'm excited to kind of just share kind of the perspective that we take as an organization and the work that we're doing. Because when we talk about social justice, and I came from a classroom, I was a previous health and education and science teacher in Duke County. But what we saw was there's like a disconnect between the conversations our children are having and then what we are actually expected to do as educators. And I think when we talk about social justice now, it's meeting our kids where they're at. So when we are saying something like our sexual health education that we have across Florida, the things that we actually talk about and the things that we are teaching is not what our students are talking about and what our students have questions about. And so a lot of the things, it's not even some radical idea, it's teaching factual, right? It's teaching what our students are asking, it's teaching them what they are already seeing in the world. When we talk about LGBTQ conversations, it gets frustrating when I hear people say like, oh, 5th grade? Like that is way too young to be talking about this. And I'm like, if your child has a cell phone, they have access to everything. And so why not create our schools to be a place where the kids are actually able to want to be there and be present there and excited to learn? Because it's about them and for them, not some antiquated decision that is made from rulemakers, lobbyists, whatever. Tallahassee, I'll just say, in quotes. But then the only other piece I want to add to that is we do a lot of work as well as how do we create those positive school environments. And really that being the driving factor. We know we want our kids to learn. They have to feel safe. They have to feel included. And we now as an organization in 3 years, we've met with 25 superintendents. And one of the biggest things that we've heard is any child in crisis, they can open the door on the school campus and find an adult who's there to support them. And this particular superintendent we sat down with 8 kids to hear their side. And we asked, okay, if you were ever in crisis, how many adults in your school building do you genuinely feel you could turn to as a young LGBTQ middle schooler or high schooler? They said 0 to 2. 0 to 2 adults that they actually could go to if they needed someone. And so when we talk about social justice, why it's imperative is because we are all in this field to do right by our kids and to set them up for success. And so we have to be responsive to what they are actually wanting and needing to be able to learn.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to take a moment and share with you today's one of the biggest Indian holidays in the world is actually Diwali. So happy Diwali. I can't think of a better way to spend my Diwali actually with such awesome educators doing the work. So thank you for adding light to my day and our journey here together. So I want to share, the question that asked I think is so important, and it's one that I think it merits really, deep reflection, because this word imperative is a heavy word, right? It is a word that's very powerful because there's a sense of urgency in that word. And I think what is interesting is if we look at kind of the history of education and public education in the US, you see these very systemic issues that have not only continued, but here in 2019 have actually grown and become worse in many cases, right? And so, our schools today are more segregated than they've ever been before. We continue to see in terms of, Val asked to share some of our work. Well, I'm on the National Coalition for the Homeless. We are sifting through data as we speak. And I can tell you that child poverty rates and homelessness rates have significantly increased. The kind of divide between these disparities is continuing to grow. And we see this in our schools, right? But not only that, the equity issues that happen. And I think that, when I think about the imperative, for me it's this kind of very, very heavy and emotional reality that our schools that have the power and potential to be these kind of life-changing, social change vehicles to transform and to bend the arc towards justice, if you will, are in fact many times doing the very opposite, right? That we have schools all across the nation that instead of doing that are actually perpetuating many of these systemic oppression, systemic issues that are actually leading to a lot of issues that continue to grow these disparities. And so we have this kind of real paradox. So when we say imperative for social justice, I think that calls on all of us collectively to start to come together and to really have really difficult conversations that are needed, right? As in the classroom, in terms of schools and structures at the district level, and building bridges between all different forms of education. So I think about higher education, as a whole in our nation, many times higher ed is actually adding to these very, very gaps and disparities as well, right? When in fact, again, the potential to actually be doing better, to be doing civically engaged work, could be increased in so many ways. And so, when we start to think about the national issues, and then even when we start to funnel into the state of Florida, we have some of the worst in terms of systemic disparities, right? Children of color that are significantly, disproportionately, suspended, disproportionately placed into special education classes, disproportionately, left out of the curriculum over and over and over again. Right, I think about our state of Florida. In fact, this is the last thing I'm going to say, or I'll just get going. My blood's already boiling. But I think about how in, Florida, they just came out with kind of the authors that are the recommended authors for the year. Yeah, 80 white men, right, on that list, 80 white men. And I don't have nothing against white men. I always say my husband's one. So I love my white man. But you know what? we have other voices that deserve to be represented and reflected and made part of our curriculum and our teachings. It's 2019, and we're moving backwards in ways. So is these conversations, is this imperative? It's beyond imperative, right? So I'm grateful actually for all you all in the University of Florida Department of Ed for putting this on, because this is the kind of conversations we need to be having. Thank you.
All right, Lucy and Ian, I'm gonna combine two ideas that you all brought up earlier. One being our teaching body not necessarily matching the makeup of our students, both in racial demographics and readiness to have conversations that students are already having. So what are your ideas or what are your practices for bridging that curricular gap between who we have right now in the classroom, because that's where we have to work from, and the conversations that we need to have?
I'll give you 50 cents. We have to work with what we currently have, and obviously it doesn't reflect our student population at this time, but we have to create alliances and bring with those, the current educators that we have, and invite them to have these serious conversations and to see why it's important and to see why our students are being left behind, and to make sure that they understand that it's not a condition of where they're coming from. Usually people speak in terms of barriers. Whenever in our county, our schools are segregated at the worst I've ever seen in 30 years. And one of the things that they say about the students in the south area of my county is, we have, if somebody asks anybody a problem, what is the problem? Well, our ESOL students are the problem. Nobody sees this as an opportunity. We need to retrain those educators and those principals and the community to understand that it is not a barrier. It's an opportunity. It's actually a skill that the student brings in with them. It's a rich culture, and the students can have the potential to be bilingual and bicultural. And from the moment they step into our classrooms, we're telling them that there's a problem with them. And we're telling our parents that there's a problem with them. And so this is reflected throughout the whole K-12 system until the student exits out of the ESOL program and then is placed in the mainstream or the regular. So we need to stop looking at that as a problem and work with it. See how we can bring resources and actually bring a rich practice of teaching and make it an exemplary area. It has the potential to be great if we stop looking at it from the perspective of we have problems, because what we have is opportunities. And eventually our student body is going to be, our faculty is going to be reflected in our teaching, but it's going to take time. We have teachers that apply for professional development opportunities and apply for jobs, and predominantly just people that look alike keep getting the same positions. So we need to, work throughout the district and make sure that we invite them to the conversation and really do a deep analysis of the situation.
I think if we're going to be able to have productive conversations related to anything in the realm of social justice, there's too many systemic barriers right now that our districts are already putting on our schools that if they aren't overcome, it can't be implemented. So what I mean by that, and what I saw is as a health teacher, so science and health, I didn't get to teach health until after state testing. What is that, 2 weeks? So it's the number of great conversations I can embed in that is amazing, it's powerful, but you give me 2 weeks to do it. But then beyond that, okay, well, let me incorporate it in my science lessons. In a school, and we especially are seeing this in our Title I schools or schools that are at the risk of being overtaken by charter schools, what we are seeing is I can't incorporate these lessons because me even wanting to talk about what Mars is made of, which kids are excited about, I'm getting questioned, why are you teaching that? That's not on the text, right? Another systemic barrier. We will say we want to incorporate social emotional learning in our classrooms. Well, yeah, it was on the schedule, but hell no, sorry, children. Heck no, I wasn't going to teach it because I got in trouble if I was doing anything but according to the curriculum standard and guidelines and timeline that they give us. Recess. We didn't have recess for 8 months, and that was something that got passed as a state law. Like, none of these conversations, if we aren't able to breach these real systemic barriers, social studies, non-existent because it wasn't tested in science. Mr. Esther, 5th grade, I'm going to let you know now, they didn't get it K through 4 because we needed to do math in that time slot. This is the reality of what we are seeing in our schools, and if we are going to have any productive conversations about, because at the end of the day, I give credit, I will absolutely, I have so much faith in our teachers that if they were given that autonomy, they would have those conversations, but they're not. They're so restricted in being able to talk about things, and then when they do, this, no offense to Seminole County, but what happened in Seminole County? Teacher read a book, Marlon Bundo, 2 boy bunnies that whatever got married, right? If you've read the book, it's a really innocent book. What's the district's response? Because parents were angry. We investigated the teacher, and they did. How do you want to stay in the classroom when that's the reality of what we are seeing when you do try to have these conversations, is you get chopped off at the knees by your own district for trying to incorporate these conversations? And so this is kind of the work that I'm doing. I really see it as being, we have got to have our leadership, being school board members, being superintendents, being district administrators, being the ones who are really seeing it and making sure that everyone in their schools are owning it and doing it.
So, as I sit here thinking, as a black male, 2% of the education workforce, my work really kind of centering on the recruitment retention of black male educators in our school systems. In my school, it's quite diverse. I'm intentional, deliberate about making sure that I have people in my interview process that reflect the students in my school. And so we're a diverse school, at 20% Asian, 20% Black, 20% Hispanic, so forth and so on. And my school reflects that. But that's because of our intentionality in our hiring process. At our district level, and kind of to Ian's point, I want to talking about when she moved, and we were having conversations. I was frustrated. I'm the only black male principal in Seminole County out of 70 schools. And I was telling her some of my frustrations, and she was telling me, Byron, it's not that bad. She says it's worse. I said, it's not possible, it's not possible. And, I'm always struggling if what I'm doing in my school is enough for the kids that I have in my school. If what I'm doing in my school district as the only black male and I have a seat at the table is enough. But then I have to remember we are fighting a system that has been in place for a long time. And so I am encouraged when we do make little strides to do some of the things and some of the work that we need to be doing. And I get pushed back. I was moved from one school to another to a better school, but essentially because I was in a school trying to do the right thing for the students that were there. They were impoverished. They didn't have the equity in terms of access to the school. They were being bused from miles away. And we were trying to level the playing field, and the parents didn't like it. And like Ian said, in a school district that is affluent and ultra conservative, you get a lot of pushback. And so you have to figure out what are the avenues. And when I was in Shaken and Val session, they talked about going around the potholes, that you might experience in education. So I had to figure out what are the ways that we can get around some of these challenges in our school system, in my school district. Figuring out, I learned to lay wave, I used to be really vocal. And I don't get work done that way because people notice what you're doing when you're really vocal. And so in my district, the strategy is don't get noticed, don't be on their radar. But I'm doing the work in my school and we're making changes and kids are reaping the benefits of those changes that we have in our school. So I think there are little things that you can do, but I think deliberate action, intentionality around what you want to see is really, really important.
Extending outside of our schools too, right, into our communities as well. Because sometimes we operate in these very silos, right, and in fact, everything is so connected, and in education, I mean, it really is so political in so many ways, right, and so we have to be kind of actively engaged even beyond our school walls to really build that collective momentum for social justice. And I think also in our classrooms, right? So I went to the wonderful session this morning by my friend over here, Dare to Teach. And you know, what you're doing in your classroom every day with your kids, right? That is so important because our children are the ones who are going to grow and become that community that our schools are also situated in, right? And so I think that when we talk about this from the macro to the micro, right? In school, out of school, these connections have to continue to be kind of rippled, right? Back and forth.
Okay, so thinking about what you all said, and I've been thinking a lot about power and how much power individuals have. And oftentimes you hear from educators at all levels, whether it's a classroom teacher or a principal or a school board member or a state officer, that other people have the power and they don't have the power. How would you respond to that question about an individual's power and what they can actually do with one?
Well, you have the individual power within your close environment to continue to do the right thing and push the system and challenge the system if that's what's needed. And we all hold that power, and we should continue to do it. If you have to be quietly doing it and they don't realize what you're doing, fine. But eventually, they're gonna find out what you're doing, empowering the parents and doing the right thing. So just be prepared for the pushback and that. But we all have the power to be active and continue to do what we need to do. If we believe that every child deserves equal education, we cannot stand back or sit down and just let the system do and take its course. We have to continue in whatever we can. And that's when social justice really comes alive. You build bridges in the community, take it outside of the classroom, go wherever you can have a little bit of influence within the community and build those things so collectively you build the power and make those changes that we need.
So, I think about the power of one, and actually just, with Diwali being today, I just have to share, we have so many stories back in the Sanskrit culture where it really talks about the light and power that every human being has inside of them. That we all have this kind of agency, but that agency and that power is magnified when we come together, right? When we unify around something. This idea that, knowledge is more powerful than ignorance. Right? But it takes people acting and coming together in that sense of knowledge in order for that ignorance to be diminished. And so I think about that, and I think about it in kind of our school context. And even looking at history, right? There's so many examples where one individual had an idea, had a vision, had the determination and passion to go out and seek change, starting from their own community and their own sphere of influence. Right, and how that rippled and how people were able to connect and how that change could happen. And so I really believe that, in many ways, systems that are kind of large and even from kind of this colonial aspect continue to operate and to oppress. And sometimes it's also because we allow it, right, in some ways. And there is this kind of fear sometimes to act out and speak out, and sometimes we're punished. We were having some conversations about it earlier. Punished in ways, right? Because that's what the system does. It tells us what our place is, right? It wants to remind you of that. But I think if we join together collectively, right? What happens is we're able to hold each other's back, right? We're able to support each other in this kind of work, which enables us to kind of do this work more courageously. And so there is power in one, and there's power in unity, right? And I think we should never forget that.
And that's what when you talked about having power, I mean, I genuinely, first thing I thought, the first thing that came to my mind is every single one of you all absolutely have that power to make a positive difference, to have the conversations, to make that positive change. But what are you willing to lose? Be it a relationship with a principal or another teacher, be it you just got reassigned happenstance, right? You know that about but really, and the things, because it's hard for me because when I think of myself in the classroom, I felt so powerless. I felt like I can't be an ally for my LGBTQ students because I'll be fired. I'm a young queer person, like in an elementary school, you know for a fact, that's the first thing they would want to do is fire me. That's what was in my head. And so we have to be understanding that if we are going to do this work, it's not going to be easy. And it came to the point where I got outed at school, despite all efforts. Believe it or not, I have passing privilege, absolutely. I was cisgender, straight male, like no one had a single question, whatever. But I got outed by another teacher, and it was like, dang, after all the efforts of feeling like, let me conform to this system to support my kids, because I studied science in college, I was gonna be a science teacher, I love science, that's all I wanted to do. This is still what happens? And so it came to that moment of 3 months of being so disappointed and depressed and just over it. And I went to my principal, keys in hand, saying, you're gonna support me today or I'm walking out today. And thankfully, she said, I got your back, no question in my mind. I love you, I support you. I handled that 3 months ago, just so you know. And it was like, oh, thank you, but why did it have to come through all this? Why couldn't that conversation, why couldn't that precedent be set at the beginning of the school year? We make sure that if you're here to do right by our kids, you belong in our school. And why couldn't that be the kind of precedent that was set? And so from that point forward, when I felt like I was about to lose everything, but I didn't, that was the moment when I said, oh my gosh, I need to be driven to start doing what is best for my kids, not what is best for the expectations of a Florida public school teacher.
Ian, thank you for opening up our opportunity to be vulnerable here in this group. And so I'm wondering, are there other experiences that the panelists have faced where they realized, okay, I have hit what could be rock bottom, right? Like the end of my career or like this major turning point. What was that and how did that motivate you to keep going?
So the school that I was at previously, as I was sharing, that I was moved from, this was right around the height of the presidential election in 2016, and I was, at that time, I think I had been in school a year and a half as a principal. Very affluent school. We bus students from the most impoverished areas of Sanford, which is, I guess, notorious for the Trayvon Martin killing, if you're familiar with that. So this is Sanford, historically black township. And so the kids were being bused in my school where the average home price was between $600,000 and $750,000. And so haves and have-nots, and we were trying to level the playing field. And so I was being very deliberate about some of the practices that we were trying to implement. And the parents were, for the most part, they were fine. It wasn't until the election happened and it kind of became divisive that I had some students bring some signs onto campus. I guess they wanted to be politically active at school. And I just told them it wasn't the appropriate setting. We put something in place, we used some teaching tolerance protocols, and we talked with kids about we had contracts to have discourse in the classroom and how we were going to have safe discourse and so forth and so on. We've done all these things. And just after the election had happened, of course, our newly elected president was talking about the Muslim ban. And so my particular school had a large Muslim population. And so I drafted a letter. I always did a weekly communicator to my parents. And so before the winter break ended, I drafted a letter just like I always do. I sent it to our administrators at our school district, and hey, I want to put this out. Oh, fine, Myron, do what you need to do. Whatever. Okay, so I sent my letter out. And the letter, in my opinion, was just fine. And there were some parents who took objection to it. And so the line that I feel that they took objection to was in relation to me mentioning the Muslim ban. And so all I said later in the letter was for our kids to know that they're safe, they're welcome, that we have a positive school climate and culture where all kids can be safe, supported, and respected. Got back to school, the letter was circulated, and I had 5 anonymous parents complaining to the school board about my letter, and they wanted me to retract it. So I refused. And I was subsequently that summer moved to a new school. Happy Saints. But up until that point, I shared with another of the conference participants here earlier that I was really kind of naive as a black male because my dad was an administrator in my school. So a lot of the experiences that other black males were going through, I didn't have. I just didn't have those experiences. I didn't have those negative experiences. And that was the first time I kind of realized, like, I'm black. I'm like, Val, do you believe this? And I had a lot of hurt and a lot of anger, a lot of animosity, and I really wanted to leave the school district, but I love the kids. And I loved working in Sanford, and as I mentioned, I'm the only black male principal in my school district, and so they had managed to already get rid of one, just maybe a few months prior. And so I decided to stay, take on a new position, and I'm still there now. I'm growing each and every day from that initial experience.
Well, hardships are really hard. I encounter sort of similar situation. I work with the special population, and we have been doing so since 1996, providing support services and educational services to make sure that our students have that academic achievement. And recently, one of the district directors decided that she was just going to take that money from that program and implement the program totally different. She said, redirect the focus of the program. So redirected she did. She decided to basically dismantle the whole program. All of the stuff is basically gone. And I was the only person left there. I'm the only survivor of the program, the whole thing. So they made it so uncomfortable where I went through very dark times. I mean, I did consider resigning because it was going to be more comfortable for me. At one point, my family, my friends were like, if you don't need this stress, do something else. But then again, your children, your families need that. So I reconsidered and I said, no, I'm going to stay here and give it a go and see what happens. So they couldn't get rid of me, so I'm still there. But they did make it so uncomfortable that for about a year and a half, I physically did not have a stable office. I mean, it was just like, oh, we don't know where to put you. And it was just impossible. So I'm still there. So now I have an office and everything is looking up. But it made me realize that we have to fight the systems and the power of one. The community came together. And it's good things are happening. And I refuse to give up because if I leave, they're not going to replace someone like me to provide the services that I do. So that's the only thing that is keeping me there. If I was sure that they were going to find someone else to do it, I would. It's not that I'm the only person that can do it, it's just that as soon as I leave, they're not going to replace it. So I decided to stay.
Thank you for
sharing all of it.
So I think about, even going back into my own schooling experience in public school here in the US, just really, really kind of difficult moments that have in some ways shaped me, so even from childhood. So in middle school, for example, I had prepared this big project where we were building and doing toy drives and different things around the holidays for some of our homeless shelters. And so I prepared this speech. I had worked really hard writing it, practicing it, and I was going to share it at our school assembly. And so I got permission to share. And so, I had started a service club in our middle school. And so this is many, many years ago, but it brings me back thinking about this. And right before I went up on stage, I was kind of behind the curtains. One of my teachers, he came up to me and he took my bindi off my head. And I'll start crying, but he said to me, you can't go up there wearing your dot. Nobody's gonna listen to you. You gotta know when to wear it and when not to. And he just took it off. And I really felt so violated, right? This kind of stripping in some way. And then I was just tousled to go up there and to speak. And I remember kind of doing the speech. I had practiced it so hard, but the entire time, I really wasn't present, right? It was like a complete blur, because in my head, I just was thinking it was very dramatic, ways. And the worst part about that now, thinking about this now as an adult, is I really had nobody to really even go talk to about what happened, right? And at home, I could talk to my family in ways, but I also didn't want to worry. My parents, we had our own number of incidents. Talk about kind of racist, just xenophobic, all kinds of things happening all the time where I had to witness my mom. So I would try not to bear and put that even on my own Amma, right? I didn't want Amma to feel more pain than she was. And so that's really hard as a kid, when you don't feel like you have an advocate, you don't feel like you have anybody, right? So in ways, these hardships can kind of also give us the courage to also shape our paths. And so for me, it was also this kind of moment of this paradox again of pain, but also this motivation that, no, that's not okay, right? And I need to be a voice to kind of help in ushering some of the change our world needs. But I think about how those moments have never stopped, right? So even as an adult in higher ed, at my previous institution I was at, I was called Dottie and Dot Head by a department chair, right? And she would laugh it out like it's a joke, right? And then to speak up, if you go kind of vocalize this, then all of a sudden you're the problem. You're not being a team player, you're complaining, it was just a joke, right? And so you're again, not feeling very supported, right? We talk about kind of this idea of inclusive spaces, and there's still a lot of work that has to be done, a lot, right? And so for me, I think at the end of the day, it's why I love children so much, and I think my hope is when I work with teachers and ed leaders, that I'm sending them out to help raise children who are building this better world for us. A world where, everybody is treated with dignity and respect and kindness, and, not spit upon in so many ways, right? Those daily occurrences, we sometimes say they're microaggressions, but after a while it's pretty macro, right? You have enough of these instances that kind of occur. And so even now, right, I'm in a predominantly white institution. I have a lot of hardships where some days you're doing the work and you feel just emotionally depleted and exhausted, and in some ways, I think many times, people of color and people at intersections and marginalized identities, you often almost feel, and you've been conditioned to even have to work harder than everybody else to have to try to feel like you have to prove yourself, right? I have to do 10 times to get recognition, or to, and then even when you do, it's like sometimes you're dismissed, right? Or presumed incompetent, and there's this kind of emotional exhaustion that comes with that. But then at the end of the day, what keeps me in it again is, looking around saying, well, you know what? If we kind of just give up the fight, how are things going to change and get better? Right? And looking around and knowing, I have students, and it's those moments as educators we have when a student tells you, you're yourself and you tell us to let our light shine, it has taught me to let my light shine. Okay, that's why I'm doing this, right? That's why I'm doing this, you know? And so it's those kind of moments, I think, that can sometimes give us that courage to continue, even when sometimes we feel pretty down.
So I just finished a book, A More Beautiful, Terrible History, The Uses and Misuses of the Civil Rights Movement by Jean Theo Harris, highly recommend. But something in there that Rosa Parks discussed, and I appreciate you all sharing the same things, is when I thought of Rosa Parks, I thought of like strong, steady, never blinking, and she talked about how she was always on the line of giving up. Like, it was hard. And it's not something that we talk about enough, I think, because we put people on pedestals and say, okay, these 4 panelists are doing it, and they're keeping going. And so, can you talk a little bit about the importance of communities like all y'all, and like the communities that we have, that support you and fill your bucket when you're doing it?
So I'll start. One of the things that came out of my time at my previous school is a Twitter chat that I helped to start called #Vietnamese Talk. So it's Black Female Educators Talk. It's a growing community on Twitter. And I'm not as active with it anymore. I kind of have stepped back so that I can focus on doing some of the work in my actual community. But if I didn't have the experience that I had, I wouldn't have sought out other Black male educators trying to figure out like how can someone else relate to what it is that I'm feeling, because I really felt kind of crazy, you know, in my current position at that time, because there was no one else who related to me. And so a lot of the things that I was thinking, you know, was like, you know, you're not a team player, or they're just kidding, or don't worry about it, this is what everybody goes through. It wasn't. You know, I felt very different. And so I reached out and I connected with some Black male educators all over the country and all over the world. And, you know, without that experience, I wouldn't have been able to meet these men. And so when I go to any city now in the U.S., you know, there's usually a BME there, and we connect. We try to always hook up and make sure that we're supporting each other, whether it's, you know, digitally, we're calling one another. But I have a community now, a network of people that I can lean on when I do experience certain things, and vice versa, when they need something, they can reach out as well.
For me, it was finding a group of people with common ground, and basically what the Fill the Bucket, it was actually get a project together that would start something and bring something back to the community. So getting together with a group of people that had the same mission, and we supported each other, and we created something again. So it gave us a mission to do something creative instead of just looking at what we had lost. We decided to look at how can we get it done, and we did. And we're doing it.
I think I always appreciate being able to be a part of things like this. And I think it does kind of, to your point, fill up my bucket a bit, because rarely do I get to go into spaces where I get to be or present myself in my full authentic self and not be seen as unprofessional, not credible, or physically harmed or actively harmed in some capacity. And so being able to be a part of these types of things, because I do trainings twice a week constantly with school districts. And I know if I walked in dressed like this, now I look good as hell. But if I walked in like this, my credibility would instantly be questioned. And these principals or these administrators or these teachers, it would be 45 minutes of them just trying to figure out what's going on before I can actually get them to leave with what they need to have known. And so being able to do this, I think, is definitely empowering for me, and it's something that fills up my bucket, but also intentional. Because I do like it to be known and seen, and no question in people's minds as that's a queer as hell person up there that is telling us things and is educating us, because I think we don't see that when we talk about LGBTQ people and in professional spaces, they are still very much feeling like they have to conform to those gender norms, gender-based expectations instead. So I certainly appreciate you all. I'm excited and feel positive in this space.
Wow, he's gold ready. So for me, yeah, the idea of community is so important. When I think about just the idea of healing, resilience, motivation to continue this work, community is everything, right? And sometimes you don't have community necessarily where you're situated, so you have to kind of build those communities. And I'm really grateful for communities that I've been able to form in different ways, where, I have the support and love, and I can offer that same support and love in different circles. I'm so happy to have found the All You All Collective now, right? Such great folks. So if you haven't come out to that, just applaud. They're doing it in Charleston this year, and but anytime you have the opportunity, right, to kind of, in a sense, build and be part of community and to be your authentic self, like Ian said, right? To feel affirmed, right? And also to be able to give that affirmation back to those around you, that can be so powerful. And I think it's vital when we talk about continuing in this work. I think about even my daughter, actually, she's been reading a lot about various civil rights leaders now, and women specifically, and how they kept their strength, and so much of it points back to this idea of community, constantly, right? Having kind of a community to go back to when you feel like you're falling, having a community to go back to celebrate when you need people to celebrate with, right? Because we have to celebrate those milestones as well. And community is essential in all of that. And so I'm grateful. I feel like part of the work that I actually do is community building, right? And that's part of the work that I do, and I try to teach my students now to go out and do in their schools and in their communities, because we need that, this idea of beloved community, where we can all be seen and heard, affirmed in ways. But also, hopefully unifying in action, right, for social justice and to push social change, because that, at the end of the day, is just as imperative, right? Hopefully, we won't have to have as many of these healing communities, the need for it, if our world grows in a healthier, more systemic way.
So I'm going to give the audience just a quick 90 seconds to debrief with the shoulder partner about some things that you heard or that you're thinking about. Maybe even a question that you're leaving with. So 90 seconds, the timer will go off when it's time, and then we'll be closing remarks.
She wanted us to debrief for 90 seconds. No worries.
So what are some of your closing thoughts for the group?
got in late last night and trying to kind of decompress from a long day. And Blackish was on. And I remember from just the scene, I remember Anthony Anderson saying to his mom, black people can't be racist. And what it makes me think about in my context, that in my schooling and the work that I've done and what I've learned over the years is that we have to meet people where they are. And so in doing this work, sometimes we can assume that people can, particularly people who are not people of color, are just going to just automatically, when we tell them they are going to now not do some of the things that they've always done or have the beliefs and values they've always held. And so meeting people where they are, giving them opportunities and time and space to process and wrestle with and deal with those feelings. And so I learned that from my friend because I was gung ho in the beginning and I was telling me I was ready to come for people. And she said, you can't do that. You can't do that. They need time.
This is before you realize he's black.
But meet people where they are. Believe that people have good intentions, that they're there for the right reasons, and sometimes you have to recapture what those reasons are.
Well, if I can leave anybody with something is that we as minorities or people of color have to learn to tell our stories a different way. There's many stereotypes about us and how we do things and why we do things, and they do this because they're black, or Mexican, or Hispanic, or Asian. You name it, and there's a saying for that. So we have to work really hard to reprogram ourselves and how we debunk those stereotypes and tell our stories in a very different way, in a positive way. That way we can tell the rest of the population that they're just heard myths about it because they don't really know us. They haven't taken the time to know us, and we haven't taken the time for them to introduce ourselves to them. So just be conscious about how you tell your stories and be careful with those stereotypes because we are very guilty of spreading some of those stereotypes. So if I can leave you with that, that'll be the one thing that's your homework.
The biggest thing I would say is continue your own learning. And really lean into those things in those areas that you don't know about. I'm telling you, coming from Brevard County, and if you look at even the books I read, I don't read anything about LGBTQ people. It's just not something I do a lot of delving into, and it's because I have that lived experience and I can speak to it easily. And so I encourage you in whatever capacity, if there's conversations or there's themes or there's information that you don't know about, that's the exact stuff that you need to be finding those podcasts, you need to be finding those audiobooks, those books, etc. Every single one of my friends, they give me a hard time all the time because the number one thing I say to them is, I was listening to podcasts. What is that? I mean, it's endless with me. But it's the only way that we're going to be able to see ways that we can have an impact. We have to continue to push ourselves, and we have to have those conversations with other family members, with staff members, with random folks, whoever it is. Learn and share your wins.
So I think I'll end with sharing. So, something my mama always used to tell me, many kind of stories growing up. And one of our stories was really just kind of this idea about how during the day, as we go through the course of our day, we don't see the moon. And as we kind of go to sleep and sleep at night, we don't see the sun. But they're there. Right? We have to kind of trust that they're there. But we also have to kind of protect and seek to see and appreciate and give gratitude that they're there, or else they become meaningless. Right? And so now I kind of share these stories with my own kids. And my son, he's 15, and I'll tell you, he recently asked me, he said, Mom, with all of these different issues, including a ton that he sees at his high school that he's at, right? I mean, he's had his own challenges to deal with, even teachers, right, bullying, unfortunately. And so, he said to me, Mom, we talk about the sun rising and the beauty of the sunrise, and Florida is the sunshine state, and there's so many who never get to see the sun, right? So many who never get to see the sun. And he meant it in a literal sense, right? Because we teach classes over in a prison close by where many don't ever get to leave, right, and see it. And we've talked about the intersections of all of what we've talked about, right? My class of Black and brown men are some of the most beautiful individuals, human beings who, when you talk about systemic issues, you really see these inequities at play. But he also meant it in this figurative sense, right? Knowing that we live in a country that has so much, and so many are struggling and don't have the basic human rights met. So I think as we kind of go out into the world, right, to continue to do this work with that faith, right, that the sun and the moon are there, but to not forget to give gratitude and to make sure that all get to appreciate that beautiful glow, not just some. Namaste.
Let's give it for our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your personal stories. I'm sure I'm not the only person in the room that feels that these individuals up here epitomize not only the imperative for social justice in schools, but also the power of God. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. So we're going to close this out with our couple of little activities. You've heard a lot this morning. You heard a lot just now, just really powerful thoughts and ideas and work that people are engaged in doing. So I want you to take, we'll do a Val Brown strategy here, 90 seconds on the clock. We'll do 90 seconds think time. And I want you to think very carefully about what is imperative to you. 90 seconds. What is imperative to you? Another 30 seconds. So what I would like you to do now is let's have a brief conversation with someone next to you about what is imperative to you, and then I want you to talk about what are the ways in which the University of Florida College of Education can assist you with that imperative. Okay? Okay.
Now what we're going to do, well, first let me explain why I asked you to think about that. The word imperative was very deliberately chosen when we thought about naming this conference. And it's been referenced from some of our members of the panel about how institutes of higher education aren't always responsive, aren't always quickly responsive, aren't always even aware of the work that needs to be done for the everyday in the school needs. So my asking of that question is very intentional in that we want to know, what can we do as a college of education to help with the imperative that you've identified? So the way that we're going to do this is just share. And Christina and Marion are going to record the same thing on both charts so that both sides of the room can see what is being shared. But this will be what I will take back to the various departments here in COE as we talk about our future work. Right? So we're clear about how we do this? So whenever you're ready to share, simply share.
Social justice classes for research teachers, people who are going into college, experiencing this as their education, not something you get 5, 10 years into. You go in knowing this is how you teach. You're one to start with.
So when you, I just want to make sure I understand, so when you say social justice classes, are you talking about ways that educators should address social justice in their teaching? Is that what you mean by?
Basically, like a conference like this has an actual course, like so that you go through and like I think I went to one of the sessions earlier where it talked about how my undergraduate students view Black children and just like disgusted by the results that were there, and that needs to be addressed before they enter into the classroom.
So more of a social justice awareness for pre-service educators.
Or a social justice message.
So say that one more time. Throughout all coursework? Okay. I want to make sure. Go ahead.
I want to make sure that I heard the question correctly. This is the UF connection, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. So I'm new to Gainesville and new to PK Young. So my understanding is PK is the lab school to UF?
Yes.
So I would love to see that be, that's to feel and see that connection in a way that I've not yet seen it. Again, I'm not saying anything in a condemning way. It's the lab school, and I read the history of it in a little book. I'm sure there's more than one little book. And the mandate for PK to do in massive, in fact, it was articulated in the book as it's a mandate to do innovation and everything that we have just been talking about, to do that. So it's PK and UF and that relationship and all that I don't know about what could be and what I want and believe and wish for to happen when you have a relationship between a major research institution with the tremendous resources and presence and this lab school that's an extension of it that is a public school. So I would like to see that manifested in a brazen, courageous, outrageous way that transforms the entire planet.
So the work, so I want to make sure, what I'm hearing is you want more of an overt sharing of the work and definition, if you will, of the work that PK engages in partnership with UF that is shared in more
I
global
want
manner.
PK to do the work that is being talked about at this conference and be supported 100% by the university, and to have students just flooding at all spaces with everything they have to say about what it means to be in a completely liberatory environment that enacts everything that we've been talking about.
Are you clear? So we had UFCOE connecting with students and schools. Yes? Okay.
curriculum development of examples of injustice, social injustice that could bridge the gap of legitimacy and relevancy, local examples of injustice for our kids.
So curriculum development, local, social injustice in our local area. Okay? Others? Yes.
I like how in the breakout session they combine attorneys with educators, and I think it'd be really cool to have a course on how educators or future educators can go about changing school board policies and like unifying together, because there's power in numbers and the teachers can do so much more and they have access to do so. Like for example, in Alachua County, they don't have Black history taught in schools. It's not uncommon, but it's like that could also bridge a big gap in social justice. It's actually just learning about the history that for years nobody has had access to. Even in the University of Florida, I wanted to add the second part was UF has had an ethnic race equity for about a year plus now, and I feel like colleges, institutions that are more talking about transparency in higher education. Because that also perpetuates the same stuff, who's going to access to be here, and then they want to come here into a PWI, like sometimes you don't feel like you can talk to anyone. So I feel like also up to maybe even COED to do classes on how UF can do better about being transparent.
So I want to make sure I capture everything. So that one of the pieces of clarification that I'd like to provide to you is Electric Prep Schools now offers Black history in schools. First year, so yeah.
Do you know Karen Jackson? She teaches at Westwood Middle. She was trying to get that push this last year, so I didn't know.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure she played a role. Yeah, so that is there. So then the other piece that I heard was providing some sort of content to pre-service teachers related to policy.
Yeah, really being able to choose
Yes.
policy and their power.
Okay.
Because that was a big conversation about what power the teachers really have, and the school keeps making things that restrict them.
And then in terms of the university itself or the college itself, really being deliberate and working harder towards transparency. Okay. All right. Yes.
So I don't have the background knowledge completely on this, but as an institution that's really well thought of right in our state, thinking about how you are influencing policy as a school to our state leaders. We talk a lot about, just this morning, about the barriers that we're facing, go back to bias of tests, bias of how the tests are being used, punishment being we're removing teachers because they're trying to teach this way. So if we think about the larger barrier, it's how we as a state have structured what's expected of teachers, how we grade schools, all of that. So what power positions, right, is UF in to either collaborate with other power players in education to be producing research to show the biases of the tests, the policies that the state is enacting to say that's not what's right for kids, to use the power that you hold, and then have a collective body of pre-service teachers, everything else that's going on to be the voice behind you. But what we lack is power and influence. We have the voice, so we can give you our own data. But there's the way from just knowing a little bit about UF and not graduate from here, but y'all have clout. So how do we start pushing that out at a state level to make a serious impact on the system and then have us come behind?
So using what we know from the research that we conduct and that others conduct to leverage that knowledge and that power to influence policy. Yeah.
They have to prioritize it too.
Right. Yes.
This is going to be a courageous step for UF because, as you said, this is one of the oldest institutions here, and a lot of politicians come in here. And so, I mean, I think it's possible. I don't know if you have the courage. The small metros right here, and us and many other communities can come in and be the one who share our stories. And see, those lawmakers will be sitting in that chair for 1 hour to listen. Because the stories that we share, they may not want to hear. Because they're the ones that create the situation as fact, cause all these conflicts, but they refuse to hear because they're afraid. So why can't we propose to have lawmakers here? We can behave very civil. principalship, to teachership, to studentship, however ship that we are in. It's all the result of these lawmakers narrow-minded. And the amazing thing is, we as voters, even when we are dumb enough to get them in there, right? We as collectively, I know I don't work on them. So anyway, I don't know if you ever would use that clarity you guys have, and just advise what they say.
So convene a town hall meeting of sorts.
Of education committee.
Alright, and then, again, it's a town hall meeting, but that's all that comes in, and chair students and ask questions.
I just want to piggyback off what she said. I think that was a great idea. I think the biggest thing is relationship. Building relationships with what you guys are missing. It's almost like not having a bridge to cross over, but yet you're trying to get an impact. I know for me as a student, I had a teacher. Not only was she my teacher, she became part of my life. She knew exactly what was behind the scenes. She knew the things that I needed. She didn't just do that 8 to 5. It's like, well, she's struggling in this area. She's an artist. Let me do this. So relationship, and not just knowing that, but also mental health. Like there will be maybe some other things that may be going on. So like I think having a relationship and building that bridge brings so much clarity just on every level, every diversity, every thing, because it's just you have to know everything about that and grow from it. So it's like planting the seed, but also learning to see it grow at the same time.
I want to make sure that I understand, when you're talking about relationships, you're not talking like this macro level of relationships, you're also talking at to a micro level relationships. Between UF, COE, and every other stakeholder that is affected. Let me see.
It's time for us to go on.
Yes, so we have one more. One more.
And you have to see the next round session.
Yes, absolutely. So one more. Right here.
The next time this conference is held, reserve a certain number of spots for leaders of high school students in the high schools around Alachua County to require maybe a certain number of high school students in each of the schools to be here. Because I think a lot of times they have that power to go back to their schools and kind of move and shake in ways that they might make change a lot faster than some of us can from our positions. To see them here taking what they're learning back to their schools.
So being more deliberate in terms of ensuring that high school students are represented as participants as well as presenters. All right, well, thank you so much. Off to your last round.